Hi everyone, hey YouTube family, welcome back to another video, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me here today. If you are a returning subscriber, then you are welcome back to the channel. If you are new, then welcome. On this channel, I speak faith, I speak relationships, and I speak lifestyle, all from a biblical perspective. So if you think any of that will interest you, or if you think that it will help you on your journey of faith, then do make sure that you join the family, join the community, and subscribe to the channel below. So we're just going to get right into today's video, where I'm just going to be sharing a word with you guys that has literally been laid on my heart for the last few weeks to come and share on the channel. So as you can see from the title of the video, today I'm going to be speaking about people who feel like they've been chosen by God. So chosen by God for a specific assignment, chosen by God maybe for ministry, chosen by God maybe called to your family to help your family out of certain situations. Maybe you feel called by God even to your workplace, to the marketplace, to a specific business, a need that people have. And maybe you're at a place where you've been seeing it more as a burden, a curse, rather than seeing it as a blessing. So in today's video, I'm going to be just talking us through a few key lessons, a few gems that we can learn from the story of a man named Moses. And we're just going to be digging into the beginning parts of his journey just to see what we can learn from the story of somebody who was chosen by God for a specific assignment, and to see what we can learn to apply to our own journey. So having said that, guys, let's get right into today's video. So for those who may not be familiar with the story or the life of Moses, I'm just going to give a little bit of a background just to kind of catch you up to date as we go into today's video. So the journey of Moses starts from Exodus chapter 2, where we basically see a child being born during a time of adversity, being born during a time of chaos, a time where literally the king of the land ordered for the firstborn males to be killed. So already Moses was born in a time whereby things were not easy. His mother had to risk her life in order to save his own. He was born into a family where it got to a point he had to come under the wings of the king's daughter because he couldn't actually stay with his own family. And I can imagine the amount of trauma, the amount of pain, the amount of identity crisis that Moses himself may have faced as he was growing up as a child. There comes a point on Moses' journey where we see him growing up, we see him older, and he goes out into the land and he sees basically his people being treated badly, being treated harshly, being beaten, being oppressed. And at that moment, we see Moses taking matters into his own hands. And that's going to be our first lesson of today that we're going to take away. And that is that it's so important that when you know you have been called, chosen by God for a specific assignment, for a specific thing, it's so important to not take matters into your own hands. It can be so easy to know that you have a call of God in your life. Maybe even from young, you've received prophetic words. You've received, words from people saying that you've been called for this. You have a special calling on your life. God is going to use you greatly. God is going to use you mightily. And instead of you to actually wait for God to receive the calling, to receive clarity, to receive his sending, many times what people tend to do is that they send themselves. And it's so sad because you see so many people who are living a life of pretty much a counterfeit assignment. So they're almost living like a settled version of the assignment that God has called them to do. And they're in that place thinking that, yes, I'm walking out God's purposes for my life. But what they don't know is that what God has called them to is even greater. But they have not yet encountered the God that will send them for that assignment. So that's our first lesson, that make sure that if you know you have a calling, an assignment of God on your life, do not go before God says go. Do not send yourself. Make sure that you wait for God to send you, because the effects of sending yourself are much worse than actually waiting on God. So we see again with this story of Moses that Moses sees his people being harshly treated. He sees them being beaten. He sees them being oppressed. And he goes forth and he basically deals with the man himself. And for some people watching here today, maybe you are at that place where you are walking in something, you are doing something, but you know deep down that God didn't send you. God didn't say go. God didn't say go forth, but you have been walking in that thing. And the beautiful thing that we see from the story of Moses is that if you find yourself in that place, then it's not too late. There is still an opportunity to go on that journey God's way and to encounter God and for him to say go. Because as we see with the story of Moses, there will come a time where as somebody chosen by God, God will send you. there will be a specific appointed time that God will say to you, go, that you will encounter God, that you will hear God's call for your life, and that you will go forth with that call with clarity and not with what you think God has said. When that time comes, when God actually says go, it's so important for you to not doubt the call, to not run away from the call, to not make up excuses to not do the call, but for you to obey and walk in what God has said that you should walk in. So moving on from that, we're going to go to our second lesson, which is that when God has called you, when God has chosen you, you will have to go through a season of wilderness. You will have to go through a period of what might look like isolation, a period of separation. So you might be at a place, maybe you can relate to this more, where you feel like you know you've been called by God, you know you've been chosen by God, but God has called you out of certain places. So maybe like Abraham, God has said to you, leave this place, come out of that place, leave those old things, those old relationships, those old habits. And you've had to be on that journey of coming out, but you are yet to come in to the place that God has called you to. So we see from the story of Moses that Moses literally spent, I believe it was 40 years in the wilderness. So after killing this guy, he basically goes forth and he runs away to try to escape and goes into the wilderness to a place called Midian, where he lives for all these years. And I would like to see that as Moses' period of isolation. So Moses had to be taken away, taken out of that place before he was then sent back to those same people in order to help them. So some of you might feel like you are there right now. Maybe you feel like you are in a wilderness season. Maybe you feel like you are in a place where you can't hear God clearly. You don't really know what's going on in your life. You feel a bit confused. You don't have clarity on the assignment, but you know that God has called you. Maybe you're in a wilderness and you look at it and you think that God has sent this thing to destroy you. I want to tell you today that the wilderness season is not to destroy you. The wilderness season is to train you, is to build you up, and is to prepare you for the calling and for the assignments. Now, if we're being honest, many people don't voluntarily ask to go into a wilderness season. You know, if you're in a wilderness season today, maybe you're even in that place where you just want answers. You just want to know, how do I get out of this season ASAP? But the thing we need to understand about the wilderness season is that the wilderness season is not against you, it's actually for you. And if you don't go through that wilderness season, if you don't go through that period of isolation, then when you come into that place of the assignment, there are still things in you that may basically kill the assignment or even the people that you are sent to, because you have not dealt with those things. So the period of wilderness is a time where God basically uses it to deliver the deliverer. So maybe God has called you to deliver, to be sent forth to help a group of people. But what you need to understand is that you first have to go through your period of being delivered. Or maybe you feel like God has called you to go forth in his healing power, but you first have to also go through that season of being healed. And one interesting thing that I find from the story of Moses is that Moses had this thing where he would just react when something happens rather than thinking it through. Like we see when he basically dealt with that guy, he would just react. And that same thing that we see in Moses is the same thing that basically didn't allow him to enter into the promised land. So that's something that is so important to be aware of. In that time of wilderness, it's a time to allow God to heal you, to deal with those traumas, to deal with the insecurities, the inadequacies, you know, to deal with those things that make you to question whether you are actually able to do the things that God has called you to do. Although it may feel like you have had to go through that season of separation, maybe you feel like you've been alone on this journey, maybe you feel lonely, because that's one thing that a lot of people who are chosen by God feel. They feel like they are lonely. They feel like they don't really have that tribe that they really want. There will come a time where God will bring the tribe that you need for your journey. So even with Moses, we see that there came a point where he had Aaron, he had Miriam, his siblings, that were to walk with him to help him to fulfill that assignment. And it's the same way for you, that if you have been going through this season of wilderness, if you have been going through this period of separation, it's not forever. It's just for a period. And there's a really, really good book that I've read that I recommend to anyone who may be in that season and maybe you're struggling. And it's a book called God, Where Are You? By John Bevere. So I'll definitely tag that below for anyone that might want to read that. Anyone who might be at that place where they're literally questioning, God, where are you in this season? So the third and final point I want to touch upon, the third lesson that I want us to take away from the life of Moses as someone who has been chosen by God, is that it's so important for us to see ourselves correctly, to see ourselves the way that God sees us. Because when we don't see ourselves the right way, we then basically end up sabotaging the call of God in our life. We end up sabotaging what God has called us into because we don't see ourselves as capable or able. Now, one thing that is so important to understand is that God does not call the qualified. God qualifies the called. So if God has called you, if he has given you this specific assignment, it's because he will equip you and he will qualify you for that call. You don't have to come and be perfect. We see Moses and, he encounters God. Moses encountered God in that place of the wilderness. Moses encountered God in that place where he was alone. It wasn't when he was in a crowd. It wasn't when he was surrounded by people. He encountered God when he was alone at the Mount of Horeb. And one thing that is interesting is that word Horeb actually means, when we look at the Hebrew definition, it means desolate. It means empty, barren. And some of you guys might be at that place now where you feel like you are in a desolate situation, a barren situation, but be encouraged that is in that place that feels barren, that place that feels desolate, that you will actually encounter God and receive the call of God for your life. God called Moses, he encountered God at this burning bush, and God basically started to tell him his call over his life and basically started to send him to his people. And Moses came up with all of the excuses that he could think of in the books. He started to say that he can't speak right, he stutters, to the point where he literally said to God, send somebody else. And some of you guys might be at that place. Maybe you have experienced that in the past and you've been saying to God, God, just send somebody else. I can't do this. Send someone else. Maybe you're doubting the call. Maybe you're doubting that you heard from God. Maybe you're doubting that you can do what God has called you to do. But from the story of Moses, we see that if God calls you to do something, if he sends you on an assignment, he will put in your hands what you need for that assignment. Like many of us, Moses was just looking at what he didn't have rather than looking at what he did have. In the hand of Moses, he had a staff. And literally God said to him, drop the staff on the floor. And God was going to use that same staff that seemed ordinary, that seemed simple. That was the same thing that God used to perform signs, wonders, and miracles to help him with the assignment. So for somebody that is listening right now, you might be at that place where you feel like you have nothing in your hands. You might feel like what you have in your hands, your giftings, you're looking at it as ordinary. Every single person has something in their hands, and that includes you. So I want to encourage you as I ask you this question, that what do you have in your hands? What is it that God has put in your hands for the assignment that he has called you to do? Because he's not sending you without anything in your hands. He's already put what you need on the inside of you, and it's for you to sit with him in order to draw those things out so that you can walk out that assignment. Like we see with Moses again, it's so easy when God calls you to kind of look at yourself and think, me, how can you call me, Lord? Me, who am I? It's those things that actually self-sabotage and stop us from being able to walk boldly and confidently into what God has called us into. We see the same thing happen when we see the Israelites, and in Numbers chapter 13, they go forth to go and spy out the land. And instead of them saying that, yes, let's go and take the land, 10 of the spies looked and they said that they were like grasshoppers in the eyes of those who were in the land. The people didn't even see them, guys. But that's how easy it is for us to allow the way that we see ourselves internally to affect the way that we show up externally. So I just want to encourage somebody watching this today that if you can relate with this part of today's word, go to God, spend time with him, understand those things. It's in that wilderness season, that time of being alone, being separated, that you are able to deal with those things. For God to really deal with those insecurities, to deal with the inadequacies, to deal with how you see yourself, so that when you're walking into the assignment, that you can walk into it boldly and without anything holding you back. And the last thing I just want to kind of touch upon linked with that is spiritual warfare. Some of you guys watching may be already thinking, yeah, sis, I hear you. Like even from maybe when you were younger, from when you were little, maybe that's what you've known. Maybe you've just faced so much spiritual warfare, attacks upon attacks, and you're just like, why is my life like this? So there's two things that I just kind of drew from the story of Moses to just help us understand why someone who has been chosen by God might be going through severe spiritual warfare. You need to understand that if you have been chosen by God, if you've been called by God, it means that you are already a threat to the kingdom of the enemy. Even before you know the assignment, even before you know yourself, the enemy knows that you are a threat to his kingdom. So obviously he's going to try to fight. Obviously he's going to try to attack. Obviously he is going to try to stop you from fulfilling that assignment. So that's the first reason. And then the second one is just the very fact that God allows spiritual warfare because it's a way to actually build you up, train you up, so that when you actually go into the assignment, you are equipped to be able to fight the things that you need to fight later on in the journey as they come along. So remember and understand that the wilderness season is not to destroy you. Spiritual warfare is also not to destroy you. These things are to help you, to equip you, and to prepare you for the assignment. If you can relate with any of the things that I've spoken about, whether you feel like you've been at a point where you've tried to send yourself before God has sent you, or whether you feel like you are in a season right now of the wilderness and separation and isolation, or whether you feel like you are at a point where God is literally saying, it is time to go, but you are questioning whether you can actually go, I pray that the story of Moses has encouraged you, helped you, equipped you, and I also encourage you to just go and spend in your personal time studying his story, just to see how you can continue to apply these gems, apply these truths to your life and your journey, so that you will be prepared and equipped to walk out that assignment that God has called you to. And I want to let you know that you are the woman for the job, you are the man for the job. It might not feel like it, but understand that if God has called you, He's not sending you alone. He will go with you. He will go before you. He will not leave you, neither forsake you, and He will help you every single step along the way. There is a group of people who are waiting for your yes. There is a group of people who are literally relying on you to not doubt the call. People who are waiting on you to literally go forth because it depends on their destiny. The same way that if Moses had said no, that was a whole group of people who literally wouldn't have been able to go forth out of that bondage, out of that slavery. And there are people who need your yes. There are people who need your obedience and are waiting on the other side of your obedience. So I hope this video encourages you. I hope it equips you and just makes you to realize the importance of that call of God in your life and the importance of you giving Him your yes. So if this video was helpful, make sure that you do like, share, subscribe, and also just, continue with me on the journey as I continue to release words that will bless you on your journey of faith. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, peace out and God bless.